3 of the virtual Roadshow. Really appreciate you guys being with us the past couple days, getting all the information you can. I know it's times it's maybe been information overload, but we appreciate you guys sticking with us, viewing our live webinars, going to our Roadshow page and viewing the recorded webinars. I don't know if you guys have been in the main hall to visit the virtual booths, but some great content there, great information for you to earn more points for products of your choosing. Make sure later this afternoon, go to our food court, claim your Grubhub gift card. We're doing Grubhub gift cards every day of the virtual roadshow. And we're excited to have Chris Kolacek here from LeGrand, going over Luxul solutions, going over Wi-Fi, best practices and protocols, as you see right there. We're going to be doing some raffles and be giving away a new Wi-Fi 6 access point from Luxul. And I'm also going to be giving away a decanter set with some really cool glasses here. It's got, you can't see it, it's got 21st Century on one side, and it's got LeGrand on the other side. You got 4 of those. It's a little bourbon decanter. So we'll be raffling that off as well. Ask your questions. I am going to do this a legit raffle this time. I know yesterday I said I was going to do a raffle, and it was like the first person that answered we gave it to, but I'm going to pick a random person. You just ask a question. We'll get it answered for you, and you have your chance to win. So, Chris, thanks for joining us, man. Let's get it started.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Appreciate everyone joining us this morning. As Mark said, my name is Chris Kolacek. I am the Director of Channel Sales for LeGrand AV. Prior to my current role, I was the Eastern Regional for Luxul. I was one of the original 3 Luxul salespeople back when we first started the company. So I bleed green, pretty passionate about the Wi-Fi and networking world. I'm also formerly one of the trainers, and so I still kind of do this stuff. This PowerPoint is mainly just to keep my brain on track because it's like herding kittens up here some days. So, and I've only had 1 cup of coffee, so pardon me if it's not all there. Feel free to interrupt, throw a question in the chat. I assume, Mark, we were watching the chat as well.
Yeah, we'll monitor that.
Answer. Perfect.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, don't be afraid to interrupt me at all with any questions you might have. We're going to start with some basic Wi-Fi information, go over concepts, and dig into protocols nowadays, which is probably the most confusing thing. This picture is one of the pictures we first started doing, I don't even know how many years ago, but this is when you were the integrator, on the 3rd guy to come in and fix everything. And, the world of networking is confusing in a lot of ways, but really it's very simple. And, we try to go with the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. But this is absolutely the opposite of that. So by doing this, we're complicating the entire thing. And we want to talk about Wi-Fi and protocols. So what is the first thing we need to establish? Well, we need to establish what we're trying to do and what is the goal of Wi-Fi. And it's obviously to provide a good customer experience. And the problem is we don't establish that expectation to the customer because there's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of the times the bigger companies like the ISP companies are the ones promoting it and advertising it, and they're giving the customer false information, which turns into, hey, they think they need this, and you're trying to tell them one thing. We're going to give you some information today to help establish that expectation with the consumer. Because when we don't, and especially if there's a teenager that lives in the house, this is what happens. And I'm sorry, there's going to be a bunch of dad jokes in the beginning of this. It gets better, I promise. All right, so anyway, what does a great customer experience look like? And, if you're doing URC or RTI or any of the control companies, this is how we used to do it in the olden days. Now you have the ability to put one button on a remote and make it control an entire environment. Well, when the experience for a customer is good, they are happy. When the experience is bad, you're going to hear it. Then you're going to call Mark and yell at Mark, and then Mark's going to call and yell at me. And if I wanted to be yelled at, I'd still be married. So it's my job to make sure that you have the proper information that you can give your consumer and your end user, so they are in a nice environment, that everything works to what they need it for. Now, they may not know that yet. So we're going to establish that stuff now. So the first rule of network design, and keep in mind, I have sold Wi-Fi for a long time. I've made a living selling Wi-Fi for a long time. But if you can wire it, do it. right? So wiring it is the best option. You're going to have a much more reliable service. It's going to be faster. It's going to have more bandwidth. If you're putting in a panel, if you're doing a pre-wire, make a drop anywhere you possibly think there could be a device that needs it. There are so many factors to Wi-Fi. It is so unpredictable, even in a stable environment. Just the air quality can actually change Wi-Fi. So I'm going to tell you the first rule of networking: if you can run a wire, do it. And we're going to start digging into protocols here shortly. So I got to make sure everybody's on the same page. So we're going to go over a basic network layout. First of all, you have your ISP, your internet service provider, coming in from the road, whether it's a fiber, whether it's a coax. Then it's going to come into a modem, and that modem is going to convert that cable over to an Ethernet cable. Then we go to the router. The router is simply the stop sign or stop light for the entire system, right? It's directing traffic. And out of that router, we're going to go to a switch. Now we have types of managed switches. We have unmanaged and managed. They're anything from 4-port up to 52-port, basically. They have PoE, which is power over Ethernet. There's all kinds of variations. And if you're not comfortable with managed switches, that's okay. You can plug them in. They work just like regular switches. And all a switch does is take that information and just multiply it and send it out. It's just duplicating the signal. There are a couple little best practices with switches. So if you're doing VoIP or if you're doing surveillance cameras, try and keep them on the same bank of a switch. It will help with traffic. So you can plug switches into switches if you didn't know that. No big deal. It's not going to hurt anything. We just got to make sure we're monitoring our length over our Cat5, Cat6 cables, and we're fine. And then out of that switch, we're going to go to either our hardwired client devices, such as a PC or a panel, or an access point, and we convert that signal over to Wi-Fi. Everybody's on the same page, I hope. If you're not, raise your hand, ask questions, throw it in the chat, whatever. All right, moving on to Wi-Fi. So hopefully you can hear the audio. Sometimes it doesn't work. I'm going to hit the button, and if you hear the audio, Mark, yell at me if you hear audio. Okay, so you don't. So Xfinity put this ad out about 2 years ago, basically showing that Wi-Fi goes through water and fish tanks. It goes through walls. All you need is this tiny little pod, and it makes Wi-Fi perfect. It's so easy. It goes through floors and ceilings. This is how Jurassic Park was created. I'm almost positive. The goal of this ad, and this is an ad for gigabit service. Okay, so simple, easy, and awesome. They have just informed the consumer that it's so simple. We're going to give you all the product. You're going to have gigabit service because you need gigabit service in your home, because why wouldn't you? But what they don't tell you, and that, well, they do, kind of, at the bottom, that the maximum throughput of 200 megabits over a Wi-Fi connection in a laboratory setting. The problem is the end consumer does not see that. Okay, so the end consumer hears gigabit. We need gigabit. Got to have it. Well, why? They don't know. They've been told by an advertisement from Xfinity, Spectrum, Comcast, Verizon. Insert whoever you want here. Okay, so, and I don't know about you. I don't know about your customers. I don't live in a laboratory setting. I live in a house. So when you're looking at this, this is the type of expectation that we need to establish. I'm sure it's never happened to any of you, but I had a customer when I was an integrator who actually sat in the recliner and ran this thing called speed test off their phone. And when it didn't show gigabit, they got very angry. Well, that's not a realistic expectation. So if we take that out of the equation, we can make the experience better off for everybody. The first question I usually ask in this is, we have two parts to Wi-Fi, which are, one is speed and one is coverage, and which is most important. Now, when I'm doing this in person, I can have people raise hands and everything, but I'm just going to roll with it here because I can't see anybody. They don't have cameras on. Mark's the only one on camera besides me, so whatever. All right, so unfortunately, a lot of people think that speed is more important, but you can't have speed without coverage. So speed is a byproduct of coverage. So first of all, we've got to make sure we have coverage, because if you don't have any signal, you can't have any speed. And when you don't have any coverage, this is what happens. If somebody can't go throughout their home and their environment, or a bar or a restaurant, whatever it is, if they don't have the coverage, they're going to get mad because they don't have the speed capable of doing what they need to do. How do we get there? Well, this depends on the protocol. So we're going to start with Wi-Fi 5 because it is still current. And the way I relate people to Wi-Fi 5 is it's kind of like a 4K television. There's tons of content out there. Most everything works with it, and it's pretty good, right? So in the world of Wi-Fi 5, we have multiple access points in an environment. Anytime you have more than one access point, you have a roaming issue. Okay, so just like in the olden days of cell phones when they first started, and you're driving down the highway and it's roaming and it's jumping tower to tower, that's what happens in any environment when you have more than one access point. And the environment changes. Keep that in mind. If you're down in the Southeast where they're building homes out of concrete with hurricane-proof windows, it's a totally different ballgame than if you're in Ohio where we're building everything with 2x4s and drywall, right? So we've got to account for that. That's a huge factor. We'll get into that actually. The two types, but we're talking about roaming here. So the two types of roaming in the world of Wi-Fi 5 are passive or fast roaming, whichever one, it's the same thing, call it two different things, or active roaming. And passive or fast roaming is when you let this device right here make the decisions for you. Now, we like to think our devices are smart because they're called smartphones, but in reality, when it comes to roaming, they're pretty stupid. So if you were to walk into your favorite sports bar, the first thing you're going to do is sign into your access point, sign into their network. And as you're walking through the bar, if there are two access points, theoretically, when you get past the halfway point of both of them, your phone should automatically jump to the next one. Hey, I got better signal. It's stronger. It's less noise, blah, blah, blah. Well, it doesn't do that, especially iPhones. iPhones, in my world, we call them stage 5 clingers. That thing likes to hold on to an access point as long as it can. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, jumping access points is actually challenging for a lot of devices, and it uses a lot of battery power. And most phone companies want to brag about how long the battery life is. They also want to brag about how good the Wi-Fi reception is. So if it jumps less, the battery will last longer. And if it has 2 bars of signal strength, it looks like you're on a Wi-Fi network. Well, here's a fun little tidbit about iPhones. At 2 bars of signal strength, they're actually at minus 85 dB. And at minus 85 dB, an iPhone loses the ability to transmit data. Maybe somebody out there in the crowd has had a person go, I'm standing underneath an access point and I'm trying to adjust my wireless audio and I keep hitting the up volume button and nothing's happening. And then they move 5 or 6 feet in either direction and then the audio just goes full max. What has happened there is they're in that dead zone between minus 85 and minus 100 dB, which is where the phone actually drops off the network and then pops its head back up like a little meerkat in the desert and tries to find the new access point. Now, in that little bit of time, it's dumped all that data and it's waiting for the audio to respond. So when it sits signal, that's what happens. Okay, so that is just that dead zone where that phone doesn't know whether it should jump or not, but it can't receive or transmit data. So if you're using this for any type of wireless phone calls like VoIP, and by the way, every single cell phone on the market defaults to wireless calling out of the box, you're going to have an issue. Well, unless you stand completely still. And I know nobody watching this moves around while you're on a phone call. We all stand completely still or we're sitting at a desk all the time. Right. So roaming, right. Yeah. I don't know. I've worn a path in the floor of my office. So roaming is a big consideration in Wi-Fi 5, and that is passive or fast roaming. We've got to be concerned about that. Active roaming, the other version, is where there's a controller that actually sits on the network and directs traffic to whatever access point is best for it. So it'll actually make a phone jump to an access point to get better reception. Now, the example I use for this all the time is if you go into some type of hotel or into a hospital, you can walk into the lobby, you can sign on the Wi-Fi, and with the exception of maybe inside the elevator, you never get disconnected. And that's because there is a controller telling your phone, hey, jump, keep jumping. And it's going to move it to where you have signal all the time to make that phone call. So active roaming, in our opinion, is the way to go. Companies like Ruckus do this. Companies like Aruba do this. Luxul does it. There are several companies that do it. It's a little more expensive, but it's a better experience for the consumer. Okay, that is Wi-Fi 5. When we jump to Wi-Fi 6, no more controller necessary, because the 3 roaming protocols that are in 6, KV and R, do the same thing basically. All right, so this is where the protocols start coming in. So we've got to get coverage everywhere before we can have speed. There are 2 types of coverage in 5, well, 2 frequencies in 5. We have 2.4 and we have 5G. Now 2.4 is a big wave, all right, that goes through building materials better, but it's slower. 5G is a smaller wave. It's much faster, but it doesn't go nearly as far and doesn't go through materials as well. When you jump up to 6E or 7, you gain that 6 gigahertz band, which is even faster, but it goes through less materials and it's slower. It goes to the shorter distance, excuse me. So now we've got to determine, hey, does the customer want 2.4 coverage? Do they want 5G coverage? Do they want 6G coverage? Because this is going to change the amount of hardware we need and where we put them. Okay. Remember the 900 megahertz phone with the long antenna, the click, click, click antenna you had to pull out when you were a kid, that you could walk 3 blocks from your house and still make a phone call? That's because it had this massively long wave that went through building materials really well. The unfortunate part is everybody else could hear your phone call because they had 900 megahertz phones as well. So 2.4, big wave, 5G, small wave. Think subwoofers, 100 hertz and below. You can hear those things for miles, and they go through all types of building materials. So the lower that frequency, the slower it is, and the less materials it'll go through. Just to give you an idea, I want you to look at that bottom one, 32 to 50 dB. So we can lose, on a scale of 0 to 100, we can lose half of our signal trying to go through metal with Wi-Fi. So again, the environment is the biggest single factor when we're trying to set up a network. Again, we talk about down in Florida. I have a friend of mine who has a condo in Hollywood, Florida, and it's a 625 square foot condo with a 12 square foot porch. And I had to put 2 access points in, one inside, one outside, because when he closed the sliding door, he couldn't get Wi-Fi out on his 12 square foot porch because it was a hurricane proof glass. And there's something in there that blocks the signal. So knowing the environment is extremely important when we start talking about laying out where to put the access points, how to get the coverage, again, how to establish that expectation for the consumer. When we start talking about where we're going to put access points and how many we need, we have to understand what speeds that the consumer actually needs. And first rule of thumb, the speeds on the box are never what you're going to get. In a real world application, you're going to get half of that. So in Wi-Fi 5, you have, as everybody, hopefully everybody's familiar with the terms like 2x2 and 3x3 and 4x4 in an access point. And all that means is Wi-Fi is a half duplex signal, so it can't send and receive at the same time. So in a 4x4, you have 4 antennas for transmission, sending out a signal, and you have 4 for receiving. And in Wi-Fi 5, a good rule of thumb is each antenna is worth 150 megabits of speed. So if you have 4 antennas to receive at 150 each, somebody math, 4 times 150. Nobody's really responding, Mark. What the heck?
I don't do numbers.
It's 600. Well, maybe there must be a lot of Michigan fans on here. They don't know how to do numbers either.
Somebody just go blue. So we have to watch them.
Good luck. Yeah. All right. So the Connor Stallions MVP. Anyway, 600. All right. So follow along with me here. So we've got 600 megabits capable on a 4x4 Wi-Fi 5 access point. In the real world, you'll get half of that. So if you can get 300 megabits on Wi-Fi 5 on a 4x4, you are screaming fast. And this is just physics. This is not anything to do with any particular brand. This applies universally. We talked about Wi-Fi being half duplex. So how do we get that speed? Again, there's many variables. Number 1, signal strength. We've got to have the coverage. Number 2, channel utilization, whether it's 2.4 or 5G. 5G much being faster than 6G, being even faster than that. RF interference. Everything in a home throws off RF interference that has any type of power to it. Any lights, any ceiling fans, any HVAC, any type of light bulb or baby monitor or whatever there is. 6 to 8 seconds later delay. It'd be like being on radio again. Good gosh, my bad.
If you want to ask any questions to get responses, it's going to be about a 6-second delay, just so you know.
All right, on it. So RF interference is everywhere. We've got to account for that, and we're going to show you how to do that. Number of client devices. In the world of Wi-Fi 5, each access point can hold 512 devices, 256 per band. Now, it's important when you get into a light commercial application like a sports bar, because remember we talked about iPhones being like a stage 5 clinger and holding onto Wi-Fi. Well, they also hold onto a network. So an iPhone will hang onto a network for up to 90 days. So take the scenario, if I go into a sports bar when I'm visiting 21st Century's location in Florida, and I go in, I sign onto the network, and I leave, and I'm not going to be back for months, but my phone is hanging on their network, taking up 1 client device, spot of memory. Access points are just like every other piece of electronics. The less memory that is available, the slower it's going to operate. So if you have people that entertain a lot in a residential application, or you have somebody that has a lot of kids and they have a lot of friends, and the kids have their friends over, and the first question the friends ask are, hey, what's the Wi-Fi password? Okay? And if your kids don't have friends, sorry, they're a-holes. That's not my fault. But when they do leave, eventually, their phones are hanging on that network. And you can imagine how many can actually build up on 90 days. So the cheat code to this, have a switch that has a timed port reset and reset the access point once a week. I do mine at Thursday night at like 3 o'clock in the morning. It just power cycles. It dumps the cache. It clears off any devices that are hanging. It will keep the network sped up. AP and client specifications, again, if your client has anything bought off, the Jungle website, then it's probably going to be sitting on the 2.4 band. There aren't a lot of less expensive pieces of Wi-Fi product that sit on the 5G band yet. So whatever that device is calling for is going to determine the speed of the network. And beamforming, which was a buzzword several years ago, it's kind of gotten pushed away. Beamforming is simply this. And I do this live, so if I'm standing on a stage and I'm presenting to 133 of you, and I'm an access point, and you are all mobile devices, and 132 of you are text messaging, and the one person, like Sean, is watching a 4K video, beamforming simply allows me to concentrate really hard on Sean and give him the bandwidth that he needs. That's it. It's the ability of an access point to deliver bandwidth to a specific device when it's called upon. So I'm not ignoring everybody else. I'm just making sure he gets dumped the bandwidth, so I'm concentrating on him a little more. And then you have the largest one, the environment. We've talked about it already. Environmental factors make up the biggest thing in the way speed performs in a network. If we don't tell the customer, they get mad, and rightfully so. If they don't understand, gigabit doesn't mean what gigabit Wi-Fi, it means gigabit on a hard line, and they're running speed test, which lies anyway, they're going to be upset that they're not getting what they paid for. So how do we do this? Well, here we go. 10 years ago, Wi-Fi 5 came out, and on the 5G band, it had a theoretical top speed of 6.9 gigabits per second. We see 1. So, yep, that's pretty accurate. In the world of Wi-Fi, 300. Now, you can get a little higher than 300. You might see the 3 teens, 320s. Cool. But 300 megabits in a realistic and real-world environment is flying on Wi-Fi 5. Then, 6 years later, 2020, right in the middle of that whole pandemic thing, Wi-Fi 6 comes out. Now, in Wi-Fi 6, we don't gain the 6G band. We're still on 5G. But the theoretical top speed went up to 9.6. In real world, we see 1.2. And on Wi-Fi, we jump up to 350. Now, there's the same band. We haven't changed the frequency. The difference between 5 and 6 is we've learned how to do compression better. That's it. And we're going to go into that. A year later, they come out with 6E. Now, 6E, we do jump up to that 6 gigahertz band. So faster, shorter wave, 9.6 still on the top end, 1.5 in a real world on a hard line, and then we've seen up to 400 on Wi-Fi on 6G band. And then earlier this year, Wi-Fi 7 was ratified in January, a theoretical top speed of 46 gigabits per second, which is insane. And we've seen actually 6 on a hard line, so quite a differential. And to be quite honest, we don't know what it's going to do in Wi-Fi yet. There are no mobile devices that work with Wi-Fi 7 that are completely certified. And so we're still in that trial and error phase. So how I relate this, again, Wi-Fi 5 is like your 4K television. Wi-Fi 6E is like 8K. It's out there. There's not much content. And then Wi-Fi 7 is 16K. Cool. I'm sure it's going to be great when there's content that we can actually use with it. If you don't know, most mobile devices like to live between 150 and 250 megabits per second. Okay, so that is the world that they really, really like. If you give a mobile device 150, you're going to be able to do anything you need on a network. We go back to the ad, according to Comcast, Xfinity, Verizon, Spectrum, that maximum throughput of 200 megabits per second over Wi-Fi. So we know what they're working with, which is a 1x1 router or 2x2 max, because we know it's half duplex and we know what it's good for on signal speed. But why do we need that speed? Gigabit, got to have gigabit. Well, because the 2 top reasons I hear, number one, we stream 4K. So if you look at the top left, Netflix, 4K Ultra HD, 25 megabits per second. And that is at startup. Okay, so you have to realize, once that little buffer bar comes along, you don't need that much speed, right? So 25 megabits per second. Number one, if you're streaming 4K, you should be on a wired device. Now, I understand if you're streaming it on a mobile, but I don't know many people that stream 4K on mobile devices. And if you do, all right, you still only need 25 megabits per second. We don't need gig. My second most favorite one is because my children game. Cool. Bottom left corner, Xbox Live, 3 megabits per second. Wow. It's not nearly what we think it is. Okay, so this is where establishing that expectation comes. Because, yeah, you might have the customer want to buy gig service for their hard line. That's fine. But when it comes to Wi-Fi, we've got to say, hey, the max you're going to get is probably 300 to 350. And that's plenty. It's actually doing really good. My favorite thing, I love to jam out to Spotify high quality at 0.32 megabits per second. Takes a ton of bandwidth. So don't read anything on the left of this screen. Yeah, because you can't see me pointing at it there. Don't read anything on the left. I want to look on the right here real quick. So we've talked about access points like 2x2, 3x3, and 4x4. Well, what's on the other end? So this is the weakest link in the chain theory. And the device is on the other end, and it's usually the bottleneck. So 4x4 access points have been out for a long time. But we look at like Wi-Fi 6 devices. Now, I know there are newer ones, all right? But up to an iPhone 13, they're 2x2s. So in the real world, the maximum speed they can receive is 300 megabits per second, right? And then we take half of that. So a 2x2, if you see 150 or above, you're flying. You're doing great. You go down to Wi-Fi 5 devices, you're going to see some 3x3s, which is awesome. They're getting faster. There are no 4x4 Wi-Fi devices currently being produced, mobile devices, iPads, mobile phones. Right? There are a couple laptops that are, and a couple Macs. And somebody's going to chime in here usually about this point and say, my phone says, 4x4. Keep in mind, there are two radios in a mobile device. There's a cellular band and there's a Wi-Fi band. There are several 4x4 cellular band phones out there. There are 0 4x4 Wi-Fi band mobile devices out there. So it's a little bit of a
question.
market.
If these are minimum requirements, I'm not sure if this is related to this slide or the last one.
On minimum requirements?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate just a little bit?
Yeah, Christopher asked a question. Are these minimum requirements? Why don't you go ahead and respond to that? I don't know if this is on this slide or the last slide.
No, not minimum. Oh, probably on the last slide.
Right.
If we're looking at this slide, no, these are not minimums. This is what they actually use. Okay, so I guess you can call it minimum because you got to have this for it to work correctly. So yeah, it depends how you look at it. But for 4K Ultra HD, you've got to have 25 for it to start up, and it drops down to like 16 once it's going. So I guess, yeah, to make them work, minimum.
This is probably one of the better slide presentations we've seen. Could we get a copy of this? We could even have it on our site, or we could take out some of the other stuff. But this is really good information.
Yeah, I can get you. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
I have no problem with that. So we've talked about antennas and the device being the bottleneck. Now, if you look on the left side there, and you probably have cheated, it talks about MIMO. Now, for those of you who don't know what MIMO is multi-in, multi-out. And the way when Wi-Fi first started, how it worked, again, if I was live, I'm standing on a stage, I'm the access point, everybody else is a mobile device. MIMO is, I would have to have a conversation with everybody in the first row, left to right. Then it would jump to the second row, left to right. Third row, left to right. And it's one-on-one conversations at each time, and then it circles back to the first person. Okay. So I'm having one-on-one direct conversations with every device that's on the network, on the Wi-Fi network. Now, this happens in milliseconds. It's not taking forever, but that's the way it worked. Multi-in, multi-out in the world of Wi-Fi 5, where it was introduced, means I can talk to groups of 4. So if there's 100 people in that room or 100 mobile devices, before I was having 100 independent conversations. Now, if I can talk in groups of 4, I'm only having 25 conversations. And as the access point, I've just sped up the whole process. Now, I haven't changed frequency. We haven't jumped from 5 to 6 or anything like that. We've just figured out a way to compress it and make it talk to 4 devices at the same time instead of just 1. So that's what MIMO is. Staying on the device being the bottleneck. Now, keep in mind, this is of June 24, this information, and we're talking about Wi-Fi 6, which came out in 2020, right? So it's 4 years old. So I think this list should actually be a lot longer. So you can see Wi-Fi 6 hasn't been adopted a ton by devices that can actually receive it and work with it. And the disadvantage to any new technology is if every device on the network isn't sharing that technology, it's not going to perform to its maximum potential. So right now you can see there are devices that work with 6, but that list, especially 4-year-old technology, should be a lot longer in my opinion. When we jump up to 6E, that list gets compressed even more. All right. So right now, these are the devices, well, as of June. So these are the devices that were certified to work with 6E. Again, that technology was approved over years ago. So this list, you can see the adoption of the technology is slow. And there's a reason for that. Number one, the chipsets to receive the signal are expensive. Number two, if you think about this, every Wi-Fi device that's coming off of a third-party site, whether it's the Jungle website or somebody buying it in retail, is probably using older technology chips. That's how they get the price down. So it's not compatible with this stuff, right? And nobody's going to buy the most expensive light switch because it's capable when all they're doing is turning on and off a light. So those less expensive products aren't going to adapt to technology for a long time. When we look at 7's a little weird. On the left side, you notice it says Wi-Fi 7 capable, and you'll read and look, oh, Samsung Galaxy Z Fold is disabled, which is odd. And then on the right side, those are devices that are actually certified to work with 7, and you'll notice there are no mobile devices. So 7's getting very confusing. Number one, you can look this information up on the Wi-Fi Alliance as well. The reason 7 is so slow for adoption, number one, it's extremely expensive right now on chipset. Number two, they haven't quite figured it out. 7 sits on the frequency of 6G that works with emergency medical services communications in a lot of major cities. And somehow they didn't figure this out when it was ratified, and they're having a lot of issues. So the protocol might actually change. So we're going to see 7 be adopted a lot more slowly, especially in residential environments, than any other protocol. And keep in mind, 7 was actually really made for augmented reality and virtual reality. So all of this is great. Theoretical top speed's amazing, but the application isn't there yet. Again, 16K television.
What if somebody has Wi-Fi 7 in their house right now? I mean, is this going to
cool
downgrade
it's
6 or
probably transmitting 5?
Probably transmitting 5.
Yeah, because you've got to imagine most of the devices that sit on the network aren't even capable of receiving 6E. So it's going to transmit it's going to go the weakest link in the chain. So right. Fire Sticks, Google Chromecast, Apple TVs, light switches, plug-in modules all receive on 5. There are a few that work on 6, but even then, it's going to have to transmit at the slowest, the highest speed capable by the device that it's receiving it.
And so what you said with content with 8K and 4K, it's going to, downgrade to 10 or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, if you've got 8K material and you play it on a 4K panel, it's 4K.
Right.
It's the same way with Wi-Fi 7. You've got a Wi-Fi 7 access point and you don't have anything that can receive it, it's not transmitting 7. Now, you're future-proofing, don't get me wrong, but again, the format is changing. It's not even completely ratified. There's going to be changes in 7. So this information here can get really deep in the weeds, and I've tried to break it down as much as I can. We're going to talk about going from 5 to 6 and what the key differences are. And in 5, you have this technology called OFDM, which is orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. And I don't know why they like big words. But basically, I want you to look at that diagram down at the bottom and imagine this. So imagine we have this 3-lane highway, all right, and that is Wi-Fi 5. And what we're doing with orthogonal frequency division multiplexing is we're putting little boxes of data in a truck, and each truck has its own lane, right? So we put a little box of data in the blue truck, and it goes to whatever mobile device is receiving it. Same thing with the green, same thing with pink. So 3 trucks rolling all at the same time. They each have their own data. They're each going to their independent user at the end. When we jump to 6, we go to OFDMA, orthogonal frequency division, multiple access. So what we did, and again, we're not changing frequencies, we learned how to pack one truck full with everybody's data. So pink, green, and blue, all going down the road in one truck. Now, if we can do that by condensing data and compacting it and getting it down the stream faster, it speeds up the network. And that's where you're going to notice the speed differential. We've also gone to multi-user, multi-in, multi-out. So MU, MIMO. And MIMO, again, was the ability for, in Wi-Fi 5, us for an access point to talk to 4 devices at the same time. Multi-user, multi-in, multi-out in Wi-Fi 6 allows it to talk to 8. So it has now doubled the conversations it can have in the same time frame. So again, just another compression way to make it speed up faster. I'm going to jump to the bottom one, BSS coloring. I call it BS coloring because it's just funnier. So BSS coloring is simply this. You got to imagine if we pack that truck with 3 pieces of data, how does it know where to deliver that data? Well, what has happened is the access point assigns a color to the mobile device that's receiving it. And my phone may be red. Mark's phone could be yellow. Sean's phone could be blue. We pack all that data in there and we do it as an access point. I say, here's this data packet. It's red. Throw it in the truck. Here's this data packet. It's blue. Throw it in the truck. Here's this. It's yellow. So when the truck gets there, it knows what color packet goes with what mobile device. That's what it does. It simply makes it easier to deliver the data. My opinion, target wait time is the biggest differential between 5 and 6. Okay. What that does is it makes the phone battery actually last longer. And how this works is very simple. In the world of Wi-Fi 5, when you go home and you set your phone on the counter, when it's sitting there, it is constantly communicating with that access point. Even when the phone's sleeping, constantly talking back and forth. The access point wants to know where it's at all the times because of that roaming issue that we've talked about. In Wi-Fi 6, when you set that phone on the counter, that conversation happens, and when the phone goes to sleep, there's no more conversations. That phone doesn't communicate to the access point until it either receives a signal, like a call or text coming in, or you wake the phone up. So by not communicating all the time, you're saving battery life. So that happens between 5 and 6. Okay? And again, we haven't changed frequencies. All right, so now we're going to go from 6 to 6E, and the only difference is we have added that 6G frequency. All right, so we've got that other band out there that we can put data on, and that's how we increase the speed from 6 to 6E. There's no compression changes. There's no anything else, just the frequency. And then when we jump from 6E to 7, this gets really deep in the woods. All right, so Wi-Fi 7 theoretically can support up to 46 gigabits per second, which is crazy fast. And it does that because of the 4th line down, the 4096 quadrature amplitude modulation. It's basically a processor. That's it. All right, so we made a much faster processor.
Say that again.
Happens. Yeah. So Wi-Fi 7 to get 46 gigabits per second is simply because we went with the quadrature amplitude modulation processor. We made a faster processor. And by we, I mean somebody in the Wi-Fi.
You made that up.
Yeah, trust me. When I was reading this, I'm like, there's no way I can explain this to everybody. This is ridiculous. All right, but it's just like, as processors get faster in PCs and laptops and everything else, it's the same process. They made a much faster processor, a huge jump in technology. So that's one difference. Multi-band operation, same thing. It's on 2, 4, 5G, and 6. Right? It's got improved MIMO. So in Wi-Fi 5, we had MIMO 4 conversations. Then we went to Wi-Fi 6, where we jumped up to multi-user MIMO and have 8 conversations at a time. Now we're in coordinated multi-user MIMO with Wi-Fi 7, and you can have 16 conversations at a time. So just more compression on the multi-in, multi-out channel. The real-time applications for this, again, are VR and AR. We don't know what the true potential of it is. simply because there aren't any devices that are going to receive it. It's too new. There's too many factors into consideration. There was a chip released at CES in January that said it could receive 7, and it's been used, but it's nowhere near mobile devices. We are years away from 7 being adopted as an absolute frequency that can be used consistently. Another difference between 6E and 7 is the WPA3 protocol, which is on security side. So most of you are probably familiar with WPA2 AES, which is current for security. It's good. When 7 does finally, become the standard, WPA3 will become the standard. Until then, if you're doing 7, do not use WPA3, because if a device on the network doesn't use WPA3, it will not be able to communicate with the access point. So this is this whole backwards theory, right? You got a 7 access point and nothing can receive it. It's going to transmit in 5. And if you light up WPA3 on it and nothing on the reception end knows what WPA3 is, it's not going to communicate back to the access point. Okay, so you can actually really screw things up using technology that the stuff in the house isn't capable of doing. All right. If you got any questions on this, raise your hand. I'm going to jump to the next slide just because I got to keep.
Yeah, if we can, I don't know how much longer you have, but we have a few questions. We want to give away some prizes. Right. So do you have maybe like 5 minutes left, or how much more do you have?
I'm probably 10 minutes, but you can interrupt now. It's a good stop.
All right, so let's go through some of these. Maybe we can give out some prizes too. If you want to go to the Q&A, we can tackle these together. Let's see here. So what I'm taking from this presentation is that we should focus more on coverage with Wi-Fi 5, maybe Wi-Fi 6, rather than speed. Of course, we focus on hardwiring as many devices as possible on the network, but hard to do with builders not putting focus on that. Yeah, I can see that. Everything is wireless is what we keep hearing from every builder. So focus more on Wi-Fi 5, maybe Wi-Fi 6, rather than speed, I think is what his question was.
Yeah, I mean, in today's world, 5 is still plenty. There are very few devices that actually need anything more than it can deliver, and there are very few devices that work with anything higher than 5. So I think, and this is just my opinion, I think 5 is still going to be very relevant for a long time. Again, it's 4K televisions, man. They're not going away. And for most people in the real world, 5 is plenty. I have a 5 network. I have 3 networks in my home because I'm on the beta team for a couple companies. One of them is a 5 network. I have a 6, and I have another 5. So I use constantly. It's still very, very prominent technology.
Let's see here. What are the key benefits of stacking with Wi-Fi 6E, and how does it compare to upgrading to Wi-Fi 7 in terms of performance and cost?
Stacking 6E, how it compares to 7 in terms of performance and cost. I honestly can't give you an answer because I have not seen the data. I don't know the answer to that question. So as far as in terms of performance and cost.
I have clients sign up for 2.5 gigabits and use 6-year-old equipment and understand why they aren't getting what they're paying for. Oh, this is just a comment, I guess. Great presentation, great presentation, great presentation. So good job, Chris. Let me see, answer your questions. Are you gonna get a ProWatch a little bit? How does ProWatch compare to competitors like Oversea? Do you have any partner integrations on PowerWatch, or only for Luxul products?
ProWatch, I can touch on it, absolutely. The rest of mine is going to be, how we actually install all this knowledge, I guess. ProWatch. How it compares to Oversea. ProWatch, Oversea, Domote's, all very similar in their functionality. And yes, ProWatch will see other devices on the network other than Luxul devices. It is free. I think we're in version 3 now. Version 4 is it's in the books. It's in beta right now, so it's probably going to be a few months at least. But ProWatch, it can see other devices as long as the device has a web user interface. ProWatch can see it.
How
And to
does
the question
Luxul's
or the
Epic Mesh technology simplify network setup and ensure seamless coverage throughout a home or business?
how does it?
Yeah,
So
simplify network setup. Yeah.
yeah, mesh technology is great and it's not great at the same time. So mesh for every company works the same way. There's an additional radio inside the access point that is a radio designed specifically for connecting the access points wirelessly. So every single factor that we're talking about here, how it affects Wi-Fi, whether it's the environment, whether it's RF interference, whether it's signal strength, all that stuff affects how mesh works as well. So in our opinion, if you can't run a wire, yeah, mesh is a solution. But if you can run a wire to an access point, you will have much better performance and a much stronger wireless network.
Exactly what you said to start the presentation. If you could run a wire, run a wire. Last question, we'll give the prizes away. We are getting more and more requests for RV park Wi-Fi systems. What kind of offerings can you provide to deal with getting consistent coverage inside tin can spreads over 5 to 10 acres?
Well, lucky for you, I have a camper. I feel their pain. You have to, the only way to get good, consistent Wi-Fi in an environment like that is you have to basically overcover. And you can't, and we're actually going to talk about in the next few slides how we test for signal strength. And that is the only way you're going to find out. And I will show you how to do that.
Very good. Okay, so Steve Sumner's has been wanting this decanter set. He's been messaging us about it. So let's give that to him so you could enjoy his pappy, is what he said. So
Nice.
we'll give that to him. And then let's just pick just, it's all going to be random here. Let's see here. Christopher Garnes, you get the Wi-Fi 6 access point from Luxul. Congratulations. I'll send you my contact information. You could send your contact information to me. Very good. Go ahead, Chris.
All right. So we're going to go with the RV park analogy. So we know all this stuff about Wi-Fi. We know, we've got 3 different bands, and we know we got to deal with environment. How do we set up a network in an actual home or even outdoor? So first thing you need to know, number one, outdoor and indoor access points behave differently. Indoors broadcast in a giant bubble. Outdoors are directional. Okay, so in the world of Luxul, on an outdoor access point, about 20 foot away, you have a 70-degree cone. Right now, it does broadcast a little bit backwards, but it's not nearly as powerful as going forward. We need to know that signal strength meter. We talked about minus 85 on iPhone loses connectivity, loses ability to transmit and receive data. I'm going to tell you right now, in my personal opinion, if you're between minus 65 and minus 75 dB, that is a safe place. Okay, you can live there all day long. Anything hotter than minus 65, meaning minus 50, minus 40, great. All right, if you see minus 40, you're probably sitting on top of the access point and you should move or you'll never have children. But anything between 65 and 75 is good. You want to live there. All right, so past 85 is extremely bad. You get in that minus 75 things, the environment can change and we're going to start losing signal. These 4 apps are free or nearly free. We've got one for Mac, one for Windows, one for iPhones, and one for Android. And these 4 are what I'm going to recommend to you to measure that signal strength. So that RV park example, you're going to have to break into somebody's camper. No, I'm kidding. But just ask politely to go in, and you're going to use one of these apps and measure signal strength. And that's how you're going to determine what you need to do. Right? So what happens when you use these, and this is Insider from Windows. And if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, it's measuring everything on that 2.4 gigahertz frequency. So you can see, again, there's a lot of stuff on there. And that bottom right is 5G. It's sitting all by itself. There's a reason for that. Again, all those less expensive pieces that come off the Jungle website don't sit on 5. They sit on 2.4. And your customers are using them whether they admit it or not. Okay, so, and then you go to the top right, you can see the MAC address, you can see the channel, you can see the security type, and then you see that signal strength. And we've talked about minus 65 to 75. So we're seeing minus 53. The worst is minus 70. So these are all good. You go to Mac, same information, different layout. But you can still see that 2.4 down the bottom left and then that 5 on the right and how much cleaner 5 is. All right. Go to Android, same information, just going into portrait mode from landscape. That's it. Go to Apple. Here's where it gets fun because, you know, Apple. All right, airport utility. It is the only Wi-Fi measuring app available in the Apple Store. Why is that? Because Apple doesn't want you to know. Right? They just simply don't. They make airport utility. And on an iPhone 11 or before, it's going to be in general settings. On a 12 and above, you're going to have to go download this from the Apple Store. It's completely free. So download it and then click on it. And then you're going to go to the bottom right-hand corner. And you're going to turn on Wi-Fi scanner, right? And then you're going to get this. Okay, so you're going to see the access point. You're going to see the MAC address. You're going to see the channel. Same information, no pretty graphs, right? The next step is the most critical step when it comes to using airport utility. If you do not do this, you will try to call and yell at me, and I will make fun of you because I'm going to tell you the step, right? Make sure you hit stop. If you do not hit the stop button, what's going to happen is you're going to leave the client's house and you're going to go down the road, and every Tim Hortons, Barnes and Nobles, McDonald's, anything that is transmitting a Wi-Fi signal, your phone is going to grab onto and scan for signal strength. And in 12 minutes, your battery is going to die and you're going to be pissed at me. Well, again, if I wanted somebody to be pissed at me, still be married. So please make sure when you're done, hit the stop button. Moving on. The question for the group, and I know I need 6 to 8 seconds. So somebody write in the chat, are mobile devices good for signal measurement?
By the way, we don't have a Tim Hortons down here. For those that you that don't know, it's a coffee shop up in the Northeast, right?
It's a great coffee shop, actually. Make a good cup of coffee. All right, are people starting to answer my question here? I'm going to have to jump here. We got to keep moving. Things are happening. All right, are they good for mobile devices? Good for signal measurement? Yes, because they suck, basically. But that's what the end consumer is using, right? I had a customer come to me and say, you know what, the biggest thing, they like to read their Kindles in bed at night. So if you don't measure from where that bed is with a mobile device, and you take your laptop back there, which is a 3x3 with higher powered batteries and bigger antennas, and you see, oh, it's minus 75, and Chris said that's a safe space. The problem is, a laptop can measure up to 6 to 10 dB higher. So if it's measuring 10 dB higher, it's actually minus 85 on a mobile, and we know that's a bad spot for an iPhone. Okay, so make sure that we're measuring pre-installation with a mobile device because they suck at it. And if yours is going to work, theirs will work. Where do we put them? It's pretty simple. Grab your ladder, grab your access point, duct tape it to the top of the ladder. I don't care. Plug it in, power it up, right? You don't need an ISP for this. We just need to turn an access point on. And what we're going to see when we start giving you some heat mapping information, or you're doing your signal strength tests, is something like this if you're looking at a picture, right? That access point's in the bottom right-hand corner. Bright as the sun is good, dark as the moon is bad, right? So we know from this right now, if we were taking signal strength readings, we would have that minus 45 right by the access point. And in the other corner of the house, we're going to have minus 85 to minus 100. So we know we either need to move that access point to the middle of the house, or we need to add another one, depending on the environment. Okay. And again, all these things come into factors when we're looking at that environment. The next option, the easier one in my opinion, if you've never used it, Luxul has a program called the CAP program, which is the Customer Assurance Program. It is under free network design on the website. Okay. If you fill out a form, it's an online form, it's a PDF form, it takes less than 6 minutes. Send in the blueprints. Kelly at Luxul, who is a genius when it comes to this, within 24 to 48 hours, and the legal department makes me say 48, although I've never seen it take more than 24, you get back a 9-page color PDF that we can even put your company logo on, a topographical map of the network, why they need this particular network. It will show every part that they need. We can put MSRP on there. We don't have to put pricing if you don't want it. But the most important part is you get back this design that tells you exactly where to locate the access point. And if you locate the access points where Luxul recommends it, I make the joke, but it's true, they are the only company stupid enough to guarantee Wi-Fi. If it doesn't work the way it's supposed to, Luxul will send you hardware necessary to make it right for free. right? So they're taking the onus of designing the network off of you, and they're guaranteeing it's going to perform. This is a free service. You do it right off the website, and it just works. In the 7 years I've been doing this, I've given away product twice. And once was because somebody put a 500-gallon freshwater fish tank in the middle of the house, which kind of blocks signal. And the other time was a defective access point. I mean, it happens. It happens to everybody. So Kelly knows what he's doing, and he will turn this around for you quickly, and it just works. How do we do after we put everything in? What do we do? How do we confirm everything? Heat mapping. Okay, heat mapping is going to be from that laptop. All right, we've taken our pre-signal measurements with our phone or mobile device, and we put our access points up, and we're going to do a heat map. And these are the two we recommend. I personally like NetSpot a little better. It's just preference, right? Ikahu works really good as well. These little red dots on this is me walking around with my laptop, hitting the space bar, clicking, right? All I'm doing is taking measurements readings. And what we see from this is something changed in that top right corner of that print that we're not getting good reception. Now, building material could have changed. Somebody could have hung a mirror, quite honestly, an old plasma television, whatever it is. But by doing this, we can see what the network is doing before we hand the keys to the car over to the end consumer. Right? So now we know we have a problem to fix. Once we fix the problem, redo the heat map and hand it to your customer, because that's proof of what their network is doing. And again, it's establishing that expectation on why, hey, they're paying for 2.5, but they're not getting it, right? This is why what's going on realistically with your network, and this is why this is plenty of coverage. 3 minutes left. Nailed it.
All right.
Yeah,
we'll get enough for, let's see, one question. We got to get on to the next one. Can you go over one more time why the new 8P no longer requires a controller?
In Wi-Fi 6, there are 3 technologies called K, V, and R. They are different types of roaming. Between these 3 different types of roaming, one is for locating access points, one is for actually jumping between access points, and the other one is unlocking the access points, which is passive roaming. So between those 3 technologies and the fact that new mobile devices are much better than they used to be, there's no controller required. Now, if you have an existing network with a controller, a Wi-Fi 5 network, and somebody wants to upgrade to 6, you can add 6, no problem. You just don't put it on the controller. It will work with existing networks.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we got to run. Chris, amazing presentation, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I got a lot of good information on this. Really appreciate you, buddy. And we will see everybody on the next